Okay, as we know, the cell has a cell membrane around it. So here's the cell, and then it's surrounded by a cell membrane, and the cell membrane lets things in and out of the cell. But a cell membrane, it doesn't have a brain. So how does the cell membrane let in certain things, but also block out a lot of other things? So we'll talk about the structure of the cell membrane in this video. So cell membrane is also called plasma membrane, and it's also called the fluid mosaic model. So a mosaic is just something that's made up of many different components, right? And so the cell membrane is also made up of many different components. So depending on what is in the cell membrane, that's what makes it selectively permeable. Selectively permeable means that only some things can enter and exit the cell. Okay, so because once again, the cell membrane is around the cell. So what is the cell membrane made of? It's made of something called a phospholipid bilayer, and that's made up of phospholipids. Why is it called bilayer? Bilayer means two, right? So here you can see a phospholipid is one of these things. Here's a zoomed in picture of it. And then it's bilayer because there's two layers, right? Okay, so because of this phospholipid bilayer, then the organelles stay inside of the cell and other stuff stay inside the cell. Okay, and we're going to go into the detail of what a phospholipid is in a second. Okay, protein and lipids on the cell membrane, they allow the cell membrane to be able to receive messages, right? Because receptors can receive messages, and cells can also recognize each other based on some of the other proteins and also lipids that's on the cell membrane. Okay, so let's look at this picture real quick. Once again, imagine if I like cut the cell. This is the cell, right? And I cut a part of the cell membrane and then I zoomed in on it. That's what you're looking at over here in this picture here. Okay, so here it's surrounded by a bilayer, right? It's a double layer of phospholipids, right? You can see that in this cell membrane, there's some green stuff and there's some red stuff, right? They're not actually green and red. It's just to show you that they're different things, okay? All right, so what exactly in this structure allows it to let certain things in and block out certain other things? So the phospholipid is the main part of the cell membrane, right? So what's the phospholipid made of? It's made up of a phosphate head, and then it's made up of a fatty tail. So the phosphate head is polar and it can mix with water, right? But the fatty tail, this is what blocks out a lot of other parts because the fatty tail is nonpolar. And because it's nonpolar, it's hydrophobic. So it does not want to mix with water. So imagine like you have oil and water and you mix it up in a jar. It eventually separates back out, right? Because nonpolar repels polar substances. Nonpolar does not want to interact. And so the polar substances cannot just pass through because as you can see right in the middle over here, this middle is the fatty tail. And so this middle part is all nonpolar and it repels. It bounces off a lot of other substances. It doesn't let them through. Okay. So polar head. So there's a slight charge in the head because there's an imbalance of electronegativity, which is why it's polar, right? So it can attract certain molecules and it doesn't repel molecules, right? But the tail, which is the middle part of this cell membrane, right? The tail is nonpolar once again, also called hydrophobic, right? And so nonpolar, they're not attracted to anything because they're balanced in electronegativity already. So large molecules are also going to be blocked because these phospholipids, they're tightly packed together. So any large molecule that's trying to pass through, even if the large molecule is nonpolar, it's not going to be able to pass through. And obviously anything with a charge is probably going to get blocked also because of the nonpolar tail that's in the middle. Okay. Now you might be like, okay, well, how can the cell membrane let in, for example, water and let in other molecules that have a charge then, right? If the nonpolar middle is blocking everything out, how does the cell membrane let things in? And so protein channels, there are many, many kinds. So this green long thing here is the protein channel. So certain molecules can be passed through the protein channel. And how exactly does a protein channel work? We'll talk much more details about that later. But as you can imagine, it's some sort of reaction that opens up the protein channel and lets things through, and then it's another reaction that closes the protein channel to block things from entering or leaving, okay? So protein channels let in a lot of stuff, okay, and also can let stuff out. Cholesterol molecules, these are the things in these little red lines in between. They're just lipids and they help stabilize the membrane. So you can imagine they're like glue. It helps the cell membrane keep its shape, okay? Glycoproteins, these are on the outside, obviously, in order to be able to receive messages. So one example of a glycoprotein is a receptor to receive messages, and there's more examples that we're not going to get into. Okay, and then glycolipids, these are like, similar to antigens. They help the cells recognize each other so that a cell knows that, oh, this other cell belongs with it and they should probably attach or something like that, right? And so glycoproteins on red blood cells, this is the reason why we have different blood types. So you don't need to memorize this. This is just a fun fact, right? Okay, so in summary, right, this cell membrane, it can let things in and out. And how come it's able to let things in and out? Because of its structure, right? It has the phospholipid bilayer that really blocks a lot of things because of the nonpolar tail. It has the protein channels, which allow other things to come in that's normally blocked. Cholesterol molecules help it keep its shape. And then finally, glycoproteins help receive messages, and glycolipids help the cells recognize each other. Okay, and that's the structure of the cell membrane, also called plasma membrane and the fluid mosaic model.